In this video, you're going to learn everything you need to know about the contextualization point for the AP US History DBQ rubric. And to help, we brought in AP US History experts Chris Averill and Faeh. Now the experts are going to break down how to make sure you get the contextualization point and not just give basic background. So keep watching.
Contextualization is the idea of what they're looking for. Do you understand this in the broader topic of events of what's going on? So for example, if you have a question that is directly asking you about the causes to the revolution, can you connect this to the bigger ideas of what were going on locally, regionally, or across the country, or across the world that was influencing people to rebel?
The difference between contextualization and background is that background tends to be more specific as to historical subjects, proper nouns, etc., with no eliciting of how those particular facts connect to the question's trend or development. It operates more as a factual piece of information. The relationship as to how it influences needs to be presented.
The broader historical context is looking, can you take a situation like a revolution happening and connect it to themes, events that are going on that are not just maybe local to that area of this question. So again, if you're talking about the revolution, that the broader historical context would be what are the issues over rights, the ideas and visions about rights in relation to government, whether that's economic rights, social rights, political rights.
What I tell my students concerning the contextualization point is to make sure that they think about the larger social, economic, and political trends occurring during the time frame of the question or just prior to it. And once they can figure out a larger trend, how does that trend or development influence the question? And I also specify that it's got to be a minimum of 2 sentences, because more often than not, a student writing a single sentence is not going to be able to elaborate on those 2 points in that brief of a time period.
Bring the reader into this time period. Try to set up the scene of what's going on. Why is this significant? Why is this happening? How is it important? Try to run those questions through your head, and if you can answer any part of those to help lead into why are you making this argument, why are you having this thesis statement, that can help you build naturally in getting the contextualization.
So for a very fine example of contextualization, in sample A, in paragraph 2, so the student wrote, fundamentally, the colonists had always thought of themselves as economically independent. Since the day of the English landing at Jamestown and became economically viable with tobacco, they were in many ways independent from England. England, like other European monarchies of the 18th century, had created the mercantile system of trade between the colonies and the mother country, whereby they sold manufactured goods to the colonies in exchange for colonial agricultural goods and raw materials. Though both sides benefit to some degree, the colonists beginning in the early 18th century began to skirt the very laws that England had in place to control this trade. They discovered that they could smuggle goods to the Spanish and French West Indies and make much larger profits than they could by only trading with the British West Indies. The mercantile system forced them to be paid less for their goods, so that Englishmen could then sell their valuable goods to the Spanish and French. When the British caught on to colonial smuggling, they began to crack down with the Sugar Act of 1764. They took away trial by jury in the new Vice Admiralty courts. Unbeknownst to the king, they had now taken the first step towards creating the revolution. The student will thoroughly explain the system of mercantilism, that's the development, that existed in the 18th century as the trade development that preceded and continued during the period of the question. This context directly establishes the fundamental economic trend and why its monopolistic tendencies were a cause of the revolution. This is an extremely healthy explanation, and points would have been awarded even if it was half this length. And that's an extremely healthy contextualization of a trend or development. So here's an example of a contextualization statement that does not get over the bar for the point. So in sample B, the student wrote, Enlightenment ideas were about liberty and individual rights. They began in the 18th century. The colonists thought that their rights were being taken away. In paragraph 2, in sample B, they will attempt to establish a contextualization idea with the discussion of enlightenment. The discussion needs more elaboration as to what the individual rights and enlightened principles were and how they were a fundamental force causing the revolution.